Another thing that David Goggins provides in here, which is more along the standard self-help book lines, is he provides challenges in every chapter, which means there's 10 challenges. The first challenge that he has is he wants you to go through your difficulties and excuses you have in your life and become aware of what you're doing wrong. That's why you're going to list out those excuses. The second challenge is use Post-it notes to achieve your goals, and you're going to do this by slapping them on a mirror, because you're going to have to look in that mirror every day. That's the accountability mirror. And if you're fat, you need to put that you're fat on the mirror. If you're dumb, you need to put that you're dumb. You need to be truthful with yourself, and you need to improve yourself. The third challenge is to do something uncomfortable every day to help strengthen your mind. The fourth challenge is the Take Souls challenge. And what he basically means there is to outperform individuals in your life. And the way he did this was in Navy SEALs training. He saw that he was taking the soul of his instructor because he didn't let them have an impact on him. He made the impact on them, which is not what most Navy SEALs do in training. They let the teachers just bust them down, but he tried to outperform their expectations, and he took their souls. At least mentally, that's what he thought he was doing. Number 5 is visualize your goals. Just what it seems like. Just visualize all the goals in your head. And he did this with Navy SEALs training and other areas of training in his life. Number 6 is the cookie jar. And this is what I said before, where you create a mental cookie jar of all the best accomplishments in your life and use that to motivate yourself anytime you feel down. Number 7 is remove the governor. And this means removing your mental and physical limitations. And what he means by governor is basically the societal pressures that we have on ourselves. Like, we only think we're capable of this. You're wrong. You're capable of so much more. And so removing your mental governor is going to allow you to accomplish more. Don't put limitations on yourself. You can his belief is that you can pass any expectations of yourself. Number 8 is scheduling. This is my favorite challenge. This is where he tells you to schedule out a week of your schedule and see how much time you're wasting. And I'm doing this myself, and I just see how much time I'm wasting. This is really useful. This is pretty common in the self-help world, but the way he talks about it in here is pretty good. Number 9 is be uncommon, stand out among great people. And this means don't stand out against average people. Find great people and go beyond them. As you see, is a common theme of what I've been talking about is go past limitations, not just your own, but other people's as well. And number 10 is after action reports. This is military based, where you, in the military, after you do something, you write an after action report. And he encourages readers to do this after they fail, or basically after any actions you do in your life that are significant. And you should write down what you failed at and figure out what you could have done different. So, and then what I didn't like about this book. The guy who helped write this book and narrated the audiobook, in my opinion, he wasn't the best. And this book could have been done better. And I'm being nitpicky here because the book is great, don't get me wrong. But knowing David Goggins, I wanted so much more, because the way this book was written, it was good, but it could have been written so much better. And I think David Goggins has a huge potential as an author, even if he doesn't write it himself, because he has so much great content and motivational words and speeches that he can do way better. And I would like a book, an audiobook, an audio series, a podcast of him just screaming at the audience to motivate them, because I find myself re-listening to this audiobook and waiting for those moments. So I think that's something else that could have been done. And this book could have incorporated that a little bit better as well, I think. So that's just something for the future. So one thing I didn't like about this book and the way the author wrote it is the author would go down these weird journeys, rabbit holes, whatever you call them, and then they just wouldn't lead anywhere. The part about his childhood is it goes down a bunch of gloomy rabbit holes, and you think all these terrible things are going to happen. And a lot of terrible things do happen in his childhood, don't get me wrong, but there's some things that happen and they lead nowhere. He talks about his mom and his dad fighting, and at one point he says, "Oh, I knew somebody was going to die on," this is a spoiler, so just know that, but he said, "Somebody's going to die on my road," and it made it seem like his mom or his dad were going to one of them was going to shoot the other one, but then that doesn't happen. And then there's a whole lot of other things like that too, where it just gets super gloomy and you're like, oh no, like this is about to happen. Like his physical injuries, you thought he was going to be completely handicapped for the rest of his life, but of course that doesn't happen either. And it's just the author just like goes certain places, and then it doesn't lead anywhere. And then that's just kind of a common theme with his authors. There's just the timeline isn't very good, and it's missing a lot of things. And even in the audiobook where the author, the person who wrote it, is interviewing him and obviously skips over like big questions. Like I have way more questions about David Goggins' personal life and how he got over certain things that happened to him in his personal life. Because the main thing this book covers is all of his accomplishments. It covers his failures as well, right? But like his failures as it relates to those accomplishments, like mainly his physical accomplishments, like his ultra marathoning and his physical accomplishments in the military. It doesn't really talk about, it talks a little bit about in the military, some of the interpersonal conflicts that he had, but it doesn't get too much into that. And being in the military is hierarchical, and there's a whole lot of politics that go on there, and I would have liked to hear more about that. And maybe David Goggins didn't really do anything as it relates to politics in the military, and that's kind of the feel that I got from it. But it's like, why didn't he do anything? He could have done more there, but why didn't he? And it's not something to be ashamed of, which I think he might be. It's more of like he needed to state, I didn't focus on the politics. I didn't do X, Y, Z because I was too busy ultramarathoning. I was too busy focusing on physical accomplishments. And as far as the personal life part, I think he had 3 divorces in this book. He was married to one lady twice, and then he had another wife. And he doesn't talk about his divorces at all. I mean, I've been divorced too, so I wanted to know what he did to get over the divorce, why he got divorced. Maybe he doesn't want to talk about it, that's fine. But if the reason he got divorced was because his relationships weren't important to him and he was too focused on his ultramarathoning and physical feats, then that's good to know. It would just be nice to know that. And he doesn't have to write it in the book, but the author who wrote it needed to ask those questions in the audiobook, because like they were just layups. They would talk about the divorce and just like completely glance over that part. But also like David Goggins he has like random fears and things that he doesn't talk about. Like he's afraid of flying, and it made it seem like he says he could still fly, but I'm not too sure. But there's a lot of moments in the book too where he's like afraid of ridiculous things. But and then the rest of the book, he's like, I'm not afraid of anything. He's like, that stuff is so basic to me. But it's like, I think he's really good at physical feats, at strength and pushing himself. But in other areas, you can see he has weaknesses. So it's just admitting that part and speaking more about that too would be good. And swimming too. Swimming, it's unclear whether he became a good swimmer or not, because several times in the book he says he wasn't a good swimmer and then he became a good swimmer, but then it goes back to it and it makes it seem like he's not a good swimmer. So there's just things like that too where you weren't sure whether he got over it. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like David Goggins is a contrarian. One second he says he's the toughest MFer there is. The next second, I've accomplished nothing, I'm a failure. It just gets a little bit confusing. I mean, obviously he's the toughest guy. You'll hear about it through his military career, the physical things, the pain he's been through. But that part and it just gets confusing in the book. And also the same thing about the author gets pretty predictable by the time you get towards the end, because anytime he talks about something positive happening to David Goggins, you know it's going to end negatively. And anytime there's a negative buildup with David Goggins, you know it's going to end positively. So that's just something else that I didn't like about this book, because it's like, all right, like you could predict the outcome of the story. Another thing I'll say too, like some of their conversation in the audiobook between the writer and David Goggins was good, but a lot of it was just a waste of time. There's some really good stuff in there, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it was just a waste of time. I still recommend the audiobook though, because there are some good pieces in there. There is some good additional information that they give, but a lot of it, the writer doesn't really ask the best questions, and he stops the book and not the best parts, because that's the way they interview. The writer stops Goggins and then just asks him some questions. And some other things, and the last thing that I'll cover is that the writer could have asked David Goggins more about his daily routines. David Goggins gets into a little bit of his daily schedule when he talks about scheduling, but it could have been more. Like, this guy was running 100 miles a day races. I would like to know a little bit more about that and how he pushed through certain days. Because I used to be a runner too, and there's just certain days, or there's like days upon days where you just don't want to run or in the middle of a race. And I want to know the exact things he was said to himself, the mental process, some of his routines to get him through those days, what motivated him. A little bit more detail into that would have been nice. Same thing in the military career, as I think about it right now. Because David Goggins, I think he retired from the military. He's in there like 20 years. And they don't really go over his full career. They highlight certain parts of it. But it would have been nice to give a breakdown of the timeline. Like, I got into the Air Force because he was in the Air Force this date. I went into the Navy SEALs this date. And I did these other things in the military around this date. It would have been nice to have that timeline and how he approached it and what are his recommendations to other people going into the military. It would have been really good, because it makes it seem like he didn't get into the military until his 30s, because like he made it seem like, oh, my whole life is a failure until I went into the military. But then you found out he went to the military when he was in his 20s. So it's like, you don't really have that many failures in life before you went into the military. But I don't know, that's just my thought. Like, these are some questions that I would have if I was writing the book, and that I would want presented to readers to just make it clearer as to David Goggins' life. Because again, they're presenting David Goggins' life as a reason to why he became the man that he is today, this tough guy. So, and they don't show only the glorious parts, right? They try and show the negative parts. Well, if the negative parts of his youth weren't that long, then that would have been good to know. So if the negative parts of his youth weren't that long, it would have been good to know. It's good to know the whole picture versus just highlighting certain spots throughout, because then it makes it confused, because they do jump around. They jump around from his young childhood to the middle of his not in the middle of his military career, about like 4 or 5 years in, and then they jump like 10 years ahead, and then they jump back. So like, you think you're in a certain part of his military career in the book when you're actually in a different part. And it just got confusing. It would have been better to just have a general overview somewhere in there. I mean, maybe it was in there and I just don't remember it, but I don't remember it being that clear. And also, once it goes from the military career to ultramarathoning, you think you're done with the military part, and then they jump back into the military. So it just got a little bit confusing. And I think the reason it got like that is because they tried to put the book into challenges and also a timeline of his life, and it just didn't work out, because I think it ended up just getting slotted into a challenges type of setup. But overall, the book is great. It's phenomenal for motivation. And you can, and I recommend buying the audiobook, and you can listen to it whenever. Like, when I don't have podcasts to listen to, I just go back to this book. Or whenever I need motivation to go work out, then I refer back to this book. It's great for that. And we also need to buy it to encourage David Goggins to put out more content. He needs to put out more and more content. It's just amazing. His motivational skills are amazing, and the more content he puts out, the better. And I think all of it should be audio and him speaking to the reader, speaking to the listener. I mean, he doesn't really need a ghostwriter. He can just dictate into something and sell that to people. I know he helps like millionaires and billionaires, motivates them, because a lot of them are wimps and weak, and they live a comfortable life. And he's not about that. I think you could give David Goggins all the money in the world, and I don't think he would change. And that's another thing too that I would like to to hear from him, his approach to finances. He gets into a little bit about how he wasn't good with it, but that's the other thing is he good with that? Is he tough in that area, or does he blow all his money? It would be good to know that. Sorry, that was just my aside. But overall, this book is great. Download it and support David Goggins. So if you like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel, comment, let me know what you think, and also like this video. Thanks for watching.